So our next session is by Pat Johnson.
I paid her.
We did a lot of brainstorming how we are going to run this session, and Pat came up with a creative way. So Pat has been a Toastmaster for over 4 decades. Wow. She
So
served
young.
as a district director in District 21 in Canada, and she got that district distinguished. She served as an international director in the year 2004 2005, and then she went on to serve as the international president of Toastmasters in 2010 2011. Please help me welcome Pat Johnson. Give her a big hand.
Thank you so much, District Director Abhijit Joshi. I want to share with you some of the experiences that I've had, and we're just going to have a conversation about it because I don't want this to be formal. But we're going to talk around the idea of creative leadership. Now, what do you think that means? Like, why did you show up here? What are you anticipating that creative leadership is going to be about? Anybody here? Any idea? Give me an outline. Yes?
Inventing new possibilities.
Inventing new possibilities. I love it. Oh, if I could do that. Thank you for that seed of inspiration. Anyway, yes.
More valuable.
Yes, more valuable. Yes. Don't need a title to be a leader. Oh, you better believe it. Robin Sharma wrote the book, The Leader Without a Title. We lead all the time without titles. Yes.
Make fun meetings. Make fun meetings.
Make fun meetings. Okay, creative leadership. Oh, never thought about that. I was much too serious for that. So in case you're just getting to know me, I'm a bit of a goof, but I'm also very serious. And I spend a lot of time doing deep thinking. I see some of you nodding your head. You're going, yes, she gets deep down into it. Yes, I do. So it happens when you're around for 40 years. Anyway, I went back and I thought about things that I've done that I felt were very creative while I held leadership roles. Now, back to the whole concept of leading without the title, I can think of a whole myriad of ideas and things that I did at work and in my life when I didn't have the title to influence. So how many of you, let's go there for a moment, how many of you are influencers or lobbyists like I am? Yes, one here. Cheryl's one there, okay. We are innovative. We are creative. When we lobby or when we're influencers, we're always in free form, aren't we? We're always looking for that little gap where we can get in and sell an idea, get an audience with somebody else, and morph that idea to suit that person. That is our lifeblood when we're creative and we want to lobby and influence. So think about how you might do that. Do some of you sitting there right now going, oh, I don't do that? Never done that? Don't want to do that? It's actually fun. One of the, I'll leave you with those thoughts. I'm going to share with you 3 examples of creative leadership that I came up with last night sitting on the edge of my bed going, oh, I've got to talk about creative leadership tomorrow morning. So there's my presentation. One of the things that I wanted to think about was large initiatives. So just to use those as examples that took a lot of effort and for me had a huge impact. Things that I was proud of that we really had to think outside of the box. So when I think of creative leadership, I think breaking the box, not even just getting out of it, but breaking the box down. And the first example that came to mind was, and I'll try and do these in, let me have a look at these. I'm going to do these in chronological order. So the first one that came up for me was back when I was on the executive committee. And so that would have been about 2007-8, I would say. Chris Ford was the international president. Jana Barnhill was senior vice president or president-elect. Gary Schmidt was second vice president, no, first vice president, and I was second vice president. So I was the lowest person on the executive committee, but we were a tight team. We had a lot of synergy. We got along really well, and we were very intent. We had a project that we had worked on for a number of years, and it was going to the global membership to be voted on. Toastmasters International back at that time had a two-tier system that was really, do you know the term, it stuck in my craw? Does that mean something to you? Like it really didn't sit well with me. It ground away at me. And when I was, so step back a few years when I was district director, I phoned World Headquarters and made a complaint. I don't usually complain, but this one really got me. I received a notice in the mail from Toastmasters International with a self-addressed envelope return with postage paid, if mailed in the United States. Being a Canadian, being the other part of the Toastmasters not in the United States, I phoned up World Headquarters and said, excuse me, my members have paid for the members in the United States to send this back, no cost. But all my clubs have to pay, not a lot, but it's the principle of the thing. They have to put a stamp on top of paying for the US clubs to pay for nothing. I object. Are we international or not? So that's how this whole thing started. So forward a few years, I'm on the executive committee. Guess what? My principles haven't changed. My values haven't changed. We have, at that time, North America, all neat packaged, all our regional organization in Toastmasters, all our districts getting funding, all treated and trained the same. And then we have the world of Toastmasters outside of North America. At that time called districts not assigned to regions. That was North America and the rest of the world. Got different funding, got different training, got different status, got different everything. We had a two-tier system. Me in the middle, now in a position of authority going, this is not fair. I cannot be part of a two-tier global organization. It wasn't global, it was US, and we were letting the rest play if they brought their money. So that was my viewpoint. So here I am on the executive committee. We proposed that we bring the whole world of Toastmasters into Toastmasters International and give everybody the same training, the same funding, the same fee structure, the same benefits. What a concept. We could actually be international. So we created this project called Globalization. And we went through the board, we discussed all the pros and cons, all the costing, all the alignment around the globe, etc. And we put forward a proposal because this was a change in bylaws, which is a big deal in Toastmasters. We sent out all the data around the world and we listened to the spin. And that spun off in every direction. How we were not going to support those people that couldn't support themselves, how they couldn't come and they couldn't participate the same way, how we had a mandate to have this, who said they could come. It was pretty ugly. And yet we said, we're Toastmasters International. We're sitting and we as an executive committee are responsible. The 5 of us are sitting there. We are at now International Convention, where the vote is going to be held the next day. We are independently walking down the hallways listening to all the conversations. And it is very evident by what we're hearing is that this is not going to pass. That our membership was not supporting us being global. That was unacceptable to me. So necessity is the mother or is the creator of invention, right? We get innovative. And we got together as an executive committee and we said, this is unacceptable. What can we do to create clarity of what we're proposing? Because people were understanding incorrectly on many, many levels. I said, in a moment of sheer desperation, and now I call it brilliance, but I said, why don't we call all the district leaders who are holding ballots to vote into an emergency meeting? I said, let's put all our papers away. Let's the four of us take a chair and sit in front of all our constituents, just plain here, and answer every single question that they have. No notes, no rhetoric, no party line, no memorized responses, just meet them heart to heart. We put out the word, we had it announced throughout the convention. Was anybody at that convention?
Where was it?
Oh, that's a hard question. I don't remember.
I remember conventions based on location.
Yeah, and I remember them based on the issues, so we'll never talk about the same convention. Anyway, I remember the room. We sat, the four of us walked in, we sat down, and the masses came in. All the district leaders, the 3 district top leaders came in, they were invited. Other random people came because they heard about it. And we sat for 2 hours and answered questions. And we walked out, and the next day, that passed. It passed by, I forget, yes. We all cried. Nobody saw us. We went, and the 4 of us hugged one another and cried when that passed, because we said, this changes the world of Toastmasters for those around the world and for our organization. A big monumental moment that could have been lost if we would have stuck to what we'd been doing, sending out emails, trying to answer questions or things that were on email or on forums, but just being vulnerable as a leader, sitting there, listening to the questions, listening to the misunderstandings, clarifying things with no script, and just being vulnerable worked. It sounds simple now, but it felt really risky and scary at the moment because there seemed to be such a weight on us as an organization if we didn't succeed. But that's an example that I think of fondly when I think we got creative. We thought outside of the box. We did something that people weren't willing to do. They were reluctant to do that. And yet what option did we have? And it's like the question that was asked earlier, if you don't do it, what's the outcome? And so if you do it and it doesn't work, what have you lost? And what if it works? And so it worked. I think that for me, that's an example of creative leadership. The second example that I've been involved in creative leadership was a personal one of mine. And that's when I wrote my book on corporate Toastmasters. And that was simply out of desperation again. So I think there's a pattern here for me. When things get desperate, I get creative. And maybe you too. I was in a situation where I had worked with corporate Toastmasters in corporations for about 20 years. It was a model that myself and Rita Sanatani had created. It was successful. And we just did it on a really small scale. And suddenly it started gathering momentum. And I was getting phone calls at home that were taking 2 to 3 hours each call because it's a complex concept. And to talk about what was happening with them, how we would resolve that. I finally couldn't handle the calls because I was getting 2 or 3 of these a week, and I'm going, this is crazy. I have no time for this. My friend Cheryl Roush, who's put together 17 books, said, you need to write a book. And I said, you're right, I need to write a book. And so I sat down and in 3 weeks wrote a book. If any of you have written a book, 3 weeks is not a long time. But when you've been doing it for 20 years and you've got the spin, all you have to do is empty your brain. And I found a way to do that. I went and got Dragon Speak. I hooked up, it was voice activated. I emptied my brain. I hired an editor to sort it out because he understood Toastmaster jargon. Cheryl helped me publish that book, and it was done. From start to finish, I think it was about 2.5 months or so from the time I sat down to write to the time that I finished. But again, creative leadership or innovation because of not having enough time to meet the need and what could we do. And that was creative for me, pretty normal for Cheryl. So what might be unusual for us or creative for us in our journey might be something that someone else has done regularly around us. Okay. So don't be afraid to step out and try something that you have not done before. It might open up something completely new to you. Another project that I was involved in that involved creative leadership for me was, there was a lot of lobbying going on before this. When I was on the board, we tested the Toastmasters program as it was, the old legacy program, with our industries. We sent it out to HR communities. We sent it out to leaders in the corporate world, and we asked if they would buy this or if they would send their employees to this. So we tested the market. The response we got was overwhelmingly, this is out of date, this is irrelevant, we wouldn't buy this. Now, not everybody knows this, but that's the feedback we got. That's why we sat down at the table and said, we must create an online presence. We must create an online program because we were told by the industries out there that we're buying training, unless it's online, we're not interested. It has to be accessible. It has to be adaptable. It has to be accessible. And so we looked at that. It was a long process because we had over 300 competencies that were in our legacy program that we extracted over a year, pulled all those competencies out, put them in a bucket here to keep them and keep track of them. Can somebody make sure he's okay? Oh, okay, thank you. Don't want something to happen to the district director.
That would be creative leadership.
Not, somebody be creative, not when I'm talking. So we had all the competencies that we extracted, we put them in a bucket and we held them and we looked at them and thought, okay, what are we going to do with this? We knew we had to have an online presence. How do you actually go about building a new education program in an education program? There was hardly anything at risk. I'm being facetious. Everything was at risk because this is the only business we're in. Here we had 300 competencies. What were we going to do with it? Now, some of you will remember that we put a call out to Toastmasters around the world to be learning masters. Anybody here that was a learning master? Nobody here. Henry, are you here? Do you remember Henry, do you remember, or Salazar, do you remember learning masters? Any of you online remember learning masters? No, way before Pathways Ambassadors. We had Learning Masters and we had a project called the Revitalized Education Program. We started talking about the Revitalized Education Program on a corner in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, during an international convention. Sally Newell-Cohen and I stood on the corner by a streetlight for about an hour and talked about the way forward to build an online program. We went to work the next year not knowing how to get there, but we knew what the end result had to be. We were way over here, we had to be here, and we had to make up all of this. So we went to work.
So Nancy Lott says, I remember learning Masters D43 and had a representative.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. So after we got applications from around the world, from over 2,000 people applied to be part of this design team. And we went through them all, and we chose a great vast array of people. We chose different backgrounds, different ages, length of membership in Toastmasters. We looked at people that were professors in the university. We looked at IT people and tech. We needed all that technology. We looked at people who were trainers and worked in classrooms and had that knowledge as adult educators. We looked at ages, people that were in their 80s to contribute. What would they need? What would people, our youngest participant was 18 on our committee. We chose 250 people. We had a committee of 250 people. Anybody have a committee bigger than that? 250 people, a lot of people. I was the manager of that, and we had sessions every few weeks. We would have a call. We would work curriculum and ideas, and then we would have a call. We would send it out and get feedback, and we would get the gist of what the general population wanted, because they were representing our marketplace. And we kept compiling that over. We had spent a whole year compiling it that way and looking at. So we decided such things as, should we still do pass or fail? Or should we start doing pass or fail? Because there was a lot of argument that unless we have pass or fail, we're never going to get credit in the school system or professional credits. Should we go that way? We tore it down. We took everything that was known in Toastmasters as education, tore it down. We kept the 4 pillars, that it's self-paced, it's peer learning, that whole thing, education principles, just kept it the foundation of Toastmasters, feedback and mentoring. And we said, let's build it from there. And every step was creative leadership, because we had to build every step. And we did, with 250 people, build that process. We decided, when you watch those tutorials that are on there, we made that decision. We said, people need mentoring. Some people will need a lot of examples, not just to read it, but to see what it looks like. So we, decided we wanted that in there. We wanted to be able to have a drop down so you could get more information, or you didn't have to go there if you already knew it. We decided that there were lots of speeches that could be done over and over and over again, because we would learn different things from them when we redid them. We wanted to have presentations that we designed, we would get feedback on, and then we would do them again, incorporating the feedback. Because what we discovered in that project as we worked with it is that people were doing first drafts of presentations, throwing them away, and doing another draft for their next speech, and throwing them away, and then doing another draft. And they never took their skill to the next level, because they didn't keep the content and they didn't incorporate the feedback. And yet we had people running around going, it's so exciting when you do a contest speech, because you get to polish it. I go, well, just keep the one you did last week and let's polish it next month. Somehow that concept didn't stick in the clubs. And so they were throwing them away and doing another draft. We were masters at drafting. So that's why when you are now seeing, do a speech, get a feedback, apply the feedback, that came out of that committee. That's how that came about, because we wanted to take people to the next level, not just keep doing draft speeches, draft practices. So all through that session, all through that project, for the years that it took, we were over 2 years, we were active putting ideas and curriculum together. And then World Headquarters had their professionals package it. So we would look at stuff and say, that works, that's content. We worked on the content. And then they loaded it up in delivery. I will say, having worked on it in that preliminary creative process and deciding what was going and what was staying and all of those items, that when it came out, I went, is this what we did? However, I wasn't surprised because I worked in that field, and when you load something in a learning management system, then you're working according to what learning management system allows it to be. And so creative leadership has continued to exist in the field of pathways. It evolves. How many of you have done the mentoring component that's been added on? Okay, Anna, a few of you. Helen has. Okay, some more of you. Absolutely. Keep watching pathways because there's more and more things that are being added and changed in it and evolving because of creativity. So that's a project that for me it was like taking a step in the dark and then feeling around like this and then taking another step. And I knew somewhere out there we were going to land where we needed to land. But it was really, we had to make it up. There's a book, Walk Over the Bridge as You Build It. That's what it felt like. It was, we were building it one brick ahead of where we were stepping. A very, very creative process. So that was an exciting project for me. Yes, Anna. Get the mic.
I wanted to ask you, because it sounds like, so Toastmasters is going to be celebrating their 100-year anniversary in Anaheim, so we expect all Californians to be there.
Yes.
But it sounds like to me that this team was like being entrepreneurs in an existing company or an existing organization. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like what it was to convince and form, because it's like you were basically an entrepreneur with the new educational system.
I think our power came because we were really entrusted with the mandate, and when we selected 250 people, we knew we were getting a broad range that would represent our membership, and so that gave us some weight of influence. There were lots of discussions back and forth, like us justifying why this and not that. Not that there was, I think all of it was with the intent of let's review this and make sure it's like polishing the stone to make sure we've got the best result. But very, very creative and innovative for us because nobody knew what it was going to look like. We created avatars. We didn't call them avatars, but we had a test. And what we wanted to do, and this was our 250 Learning Masters, we had these avatars that we checked, whatever we were doing, did they pass the test? And the first one was brand new graduates out of University College. Would it meet their needs? So we had that persona there that we would run things by, had to pass the test. The second group was English as a second, third, fourth, fifth language. So people that were coming to work on their language skills and communication skills. The third group was those middle managers stuck, needed some boost. The fourth one was professional speakers who didn't get honest feedback. We saw we had a role to play there because, first of all, we had accredited speakers program, we had world champions that were still coming for feedback, and we felt that we had a part of the market there for professional speakers. And personally, I had gone to some of the professional speakers organizations, and they provided feedback on content, but not on delivery. So we thought there was a market there, so we had professional speakers. And the final one was people who have left the active workplace, but are still engaged and have lots of wisdom to share, both wisdom, but perhaps are interested in now telling their stories, have time to share what they have learned in their experiences, maybe writing books, becoming speakers, etc. So those were the avatars that we had set up when we were working with the curriculum rebuild. Again, it was creative for us. It was an exercise to figure out who are our markets and who would come. What are the gaps out there that we would fill? And pushing and shoving back and forth amongst ourselves, what are they? And smoothing that out and working it down to the 5. So it's one of the things that keeps me excited. I'm currently on a committee out of Toastmasters to rewrite club officer training. Many of you will want to cheer. But while that might sound mundane for some of you, again, it's a creative process because we're not going to start from scratch. We're going to collect from around the world great training that's been developed by districts already in response to a need that they have. And then we're going to compile it, which I think is a creative way of doing it. We could start from scratch, but it's much more innovative to gather what is already out there and validating for those districts that have done superb work. Yeah. I'm also on, I'm currently serving, let me tell you that this is not creative leadership. I'm currently the co-chair of the International Disciplinary Committee. And creative in terms of bad behavior is alive and well. But not to leave that dampness on the crowd. Question?
From the comment section,
Yeah.
Solazar thinks you need to continue writing. The Pathway story would make a wonderful Toastmaster magazine story.
Oh.
So
Thanks
Yeah.
for that, Salazar. That is probably very relevant. I was just doing an interview at the International Convention and they were interested. We were capturing some of the history and I was talking about the Pathways process. And it's amazing how many people have now come into Toastmasters that don't know how Pathways came to be. And so, yeah, thank you, Salazar. Great idea. One more writing project.
Yep.
Okay, so any questions or comments or examples that you want to share where you think you had creative leadership? Anyone? I'm going to ask Cheryl up to share with me in a few minutes. Far in the back there with the blue and yes, you. Yes, you. Sorry, I don't know everybody's names. That's rude. Hey, you.
Sometimes if you want to rally the teams, you can identify a common enemy. Maybe someone else has insulted us or something like you actually rile up the team. So did you have something like that where?
Oh. Well, I think the example that comes to my mind is the original one when I shared about the globalization, that we were so afraid of what this would do to our organization. And it was just desperation of wanting to make this both a global organization, but we felt that the people that were going to vote didn't understand the magnitude of what they were going to say no to. And we just had to be really honest. I just think that there's times when there's a force pushing against, that it's what is causing that? Like I like to go back there. What's causing the resistance? What are they afraid of? And usually it's a misunderstanding or a lack of information. And so how can we alleviate those fears? So it's going to a place of curiosity or re-educating. Does that help? Yeah.
I would like to share from my perspective.
Yes, thank you.
So I work in a software company and I kept telling the team we should work on the user interface. It's not looking good. But no one took me seriously. So I went to a conference. I took photos of other software that looks good. And then I made a presentation, said, this is Tesla and this is your old car and that's what our software is. And they get the value from them and then so you kind of rile them up.
Yes.
That's another way of creative leadership.
Yes, thank you for that. That's a great example. Thank you. I think too that I think you hit on something for me, is that when people don't hear what I'm saying or when I'm explaining something that I want to do differently, I compare it to something else. I get it out of the Toastmaster context or whatever context it is, and I go over here, just like you did. Here's sharing. Well, let's compare software. This is Tesla, this is your gas car, or whatever it is, right? And taking it over here. This is what we did during the pathways, working on pathways, was looking at how we fit and compared to university. So we're not that. They're pass or fail. We're not. We're mentor driven, they're professor driven. So, all the differences, and kept lining up and checking back and forth, but putting it over in how would we present that to the community? How would we sell it? What's our secret sauce? See, our secret sauce is immediate feedback. Nobody gets immediate feedback, not at work, not unless you've done something really bad and they show you the door. But that's our secret sauce, is that peer evaluation, that keep going, good job, right? Okay, Anna.
A question from online. This is from Sashin. Question for the speaker. How do you deal with unsupportive colleagues as a leader? Any creative ideas there?
Well, I'm always curious of why they're not supportive. So for me, problem solving, and I see gaps in things. That's my gift. When I look at something, I see something not working, I want to go in there and create something. When somebody's not on my team, I want to have a conversation with them. In some people, you have to be right up front. You're on or off. What do you need to get on the team? What's going on with you? How can I support you in being fully here? So some of those questions that are about them. One of the things to be really careful about when you're in leadership, do not take on somebody else's stuff. When they've got a bad attitude, do not assume that it's something you did or said. It could be that they just want to say something bad. It's not your stuff. That was a big lesson for me to learn, is not to take on other people's stuff. I go, not my pig, not my farm. Get over yourself. Yeah. Yeah, not my monkey, not my circus, or whatever it is. Yes. Yeah. So I'm all about, I love collaboration. And when people are difficult, sometimes you get rid of them. We got rid of people in Learning Master because it was so much energy to focus on resolving the attitude that showed up all the time. They weren't productive. That's not the purpose we were together. So you can go back to the purpose of what you're doing, what your goal is together, what your mandate is. And if the people can't get on board, cut them loose. Don't give the bad kid all the attention. Recognize the people that are showing up and playing their hearts out. Go, yay, thank you, wonderful job, yes, yes. Get the focus off the bad kid. The 1 minute manager said, take a minute and recognize what's working well. Go find somebody doing something good and give them recognition for it. Same thing in teams. I think also if you can find the values that you share, right? We have such solid values in Toastmasters with respect, integrity, service, and excellence. It's a great place to build on. If you can get integrity and respect working in your team, I think you can make teams work. But it might take some work to figure out what their definitions are. And I don't judge your integrity because I don't know what integrity is for you or what it looks like. That's for me to judge my integrity, right? How do I hold myself to my promises, my word, my performance? I don't need to stand in judgment of yours. You're judging yours, right? Yeah, yes, yeah, totally. So focus over here. Am I giving the best service? What about excellence? What's the next step so I can do excellence? Okay. Yes, Jamal.
A follow-up on that. What if the leader is falsely accusing you and and now he's actually mean and bad. And okay, let's go, coach.
What if the leader triggers you? Well, if the leader triggers you, I think it's back to human behavior. You just have a conversation. For me, it's all about you praise outwardly and publicly, and you have those tough conversations privately. Do not blow up. Do not just know something's going on. We never know, in my experience, we never know what's happening in other people's lives. So Pat turns up and she's cranky one day. Somebody doesn't know. Maybe my dog died. Or maybe he ate my homework, whatever the excuse is, right? But you know, it could be many, many things. We don't know people's lives. Our lives are complex. It could be that the bank bounced a check and we've got the money in the account. It could be as obscure as all you could imagine. Just don't assume and make it right or wrong. Don't go fighting before you go curious. Be curious first. What's going on? What's happening? Back there? Yes.
Okay. So, Pat, I think I figured out when that conversation happened. Can I ask you, you were president 2010 to 11, right?
That's correct.
And so that was in the JW Marriott Palm Desert, right?
Yes.
Okay, so your first vice president, that was 09-10 Mashantucket
Yes.
Kid at the big casino. So you were second vice president at 08-09, and that was Calgary.
Do I feel like I'm being stalked? Okay.
It's all off the internet. So that happened in Calgary.
Yes, it did.
Okay, there you go, everyone.
And
You're
so
welcome.
then, thank you so much. So we were talking about that, obviously, when I was second vice president, and then I was first vice president, then I was president, then I was past president. So you see how long this process took. And then when I was after that, it was 4 years after we had that initial conversation. And thank you for that perspective, because to me it felt compressed. 4 years later, we were working on that project to build pathways. That long. Yes, you have to be creative to keep the energy going for that long. Yes.
I know this is Silicon Valley, but some people are low tech like me, and I've also heard this from some of the other Toastmasters. Do you believe that the Pathways program, having been one of the innovators of it, is something for somebody that's very low tech and not very smart at computer stuff? They've shied away from it. I've shied away from it because I just am not good at computer stuff. Is this something that somebody with low tech intelligence can learn and comprehend? And is it being something that the ordinary non-tech person can handle?
Absolutely. I fully believe that. If you have a 15-year-old grandson or a neighbor child, we'll come over and help you get on, and in about a half an hour get you up and functioning. I think, and I'm being a bit facetious because I hear of people much older than me that have grandchildren that are helping them. I heard it on the plane just yesterday coming in here, where somebody's grandson was saying to them, "Grandma, if you turn off roaming and they were telling them how to run their phone." And I thought, there we go. I don't think age is any barrier. And I think that if you get a good orientation, it's quite simplistic. You go in and you put your cursor on the title, the drop down, and it actually shows up, and you click it and it opens up. And then you click and it opens up, and you hit an arrow and it goes. Once you've done it, anybody disagree with me? I mean, this is very, very straightforward. So just get somebody to orient you. We offered printed documents for this very reason, and nobody printed them. We took them off because nobody printed them. We said when we put it out, we have to make printed copies available for people that need the hard copy. Nobody printed them. There's no need. There's no demand. Did you print any off? No. Okay. I was just curious. No shame, no blame. Just curious, yeah.
Question
Yeah.
online.
Oh, okay.
How do you deal with difficult senior leaders who is supportive at times and acts like a mentor over assigned tasks, makes the team work overtime frequently, and creates chaos in every avenue at work? Does that sound like anybody's boss?
Sounds like everybody's boss.
I'm not sure I can answer that one. I think that is very situational specific. First of all, if there's, I'll just generally speaking, if there's a wide range of behavior, the Desiderata says to avoid those people that are a vexation to your soul. And I avoid people like that. I find a way to work around them. I'm a master at, if I say so myself, at negotiating, influencing, lobbying, and to get what I want. And I build relationships. So in my workplace, I had a supervisor who was unreliable. She was, if I could put judgment words around it for just a moment, just so to give you a picture. She was insecure that I was confident. Okay, let's just leave it at that. If I was going to speak to the CEO, she was freaked out because she wanted to see my speaking notes. I said, I don't have speaking notes. I'm going to have a conversation with the CEO. What time is it? I haven't been invited. I said, I don't know. I got the invitation from the CEO. Well, I'm coming. Tell me when it is. So I told her when it was, and she showed up in the office of the CEO, and the CEO kind of looks at her and, what are you doing? Oh, I'm here to support Pat. And so the CEO and I had a conversation. My boss was never included in the conversation, although she participated, but wasn't asked to participate. And I thought, she's just bringing this down on herself. And I just sat back and worked around, and I wasn't there to blame or shame. And people show you who they are. Give them space to do it. You know, Chris Ford, past international president, and he was a brigadier general in the Canadian military, and he says, when you're in a hole, quit digging. And my boss just kept digging. So just let them be. You're not going to change them. That's not your job. Yeah. So we're on red, and I wanted to ask Cheryl for any examples of creative leadership. So can we have 5 minutes for Cheryl? Thank you. Sorry, Cheryl, it was participatory.
I loved all of these comments.
Yeah.
When I listened to your incredible stories about the globalization and about you being an advocate and being a voice, that's truly a visionary voice. And we each have it. We need to make sure to nurture it, to use it for good for the world. As a business communications expert, I'll add to this regarding how does that show up in our creative communication for leadership. This is from a longer program, but I'll give you a quick overview. It's based on the multiple intelligences by PhD Howard Gardner and Thomas Armstrong. So if you're familiar with the concept, there are 7 basic preferred communication styles or modalities. If you imagine that our TV has several channels, or our YouTube has several channels, then there are 7 main channels in which how we can communicate with other people. So the word that came to mind when you were talking about globalization is to remember our inclusiveness. As we were at the Bahamas convention last week, it was beautiful because I assimilated it to being a big family reunion, and that you show up at these destinations to meet the new siblings, and you just, and it was just a lot of fun. So when we want to be inclusive with our leadership and in how we communicate, we need to meet people where they are. And this goes back to what are the triggers about? Usually underneath a trigger is a fear. And fear and love cannot occupy the same space at the same time. So when we meet people, and you quoted earlier about Dr. Covey, seek first to understand. The second part of that is then to be understood. So that's the full quote on that. So from these 7 channels, if you will, we typically communicate from our preferred channels, which may or may not be theirs.
Yeah.
So a lot of disconnect happens with that. So the first of the 7 is linguistic. These are the people who use words. So they may challenge the semantic of, is that what you meant, or that we don't understand an acronym or whatever. So linguistic people excel in stories, in discussions, the conversations. They love that. The second group are mathematical, where there's science, the linear, logical. They need the numbers, the facts, the statistics. So if I'm having a conversation, or I'm approaching Pat, my boss, and I want to have her adopt what it is that my proposal is that if I know that she's mathematical, I may lead with, now, here's the bottom line. Boom, she's right with me. I'm speaking her language, even if it's not mine. Then I'll say 2.75% of da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And see, she's nodding her head, which is also a
not my
cue.
preferred way.
She's not.
But I can fake.
You're a good role model, role playing here. So then I'm speaking her language, then now we have some alignment. We are connecting. We can apply this to leadership and into teams and our interpersonal relationships. So the first is linguistic, second is math, third is visual. We need to see it. Show me what you mean. As Sergeant at Arms, show me how you set up the room. The fourth group then is more the fourth group is kinesthetic, where they need to have some hands-on experience. So these people are also very sensitive to other people. And then the next group is musical, where, you know, God, Pat, that just reminds me of the song, you know, we are family. Anyway, she's a singer, I'm not. So that's the fifth group. So then people may say, oh, that reminds me of that song, or something along that particular line. Those are the first 5. Then the sixth is interpersonal, which are people. They're the first ones at the meeting, last one to leave, great to volunteer for committees. You can count on these people, especially if they are linguistic, interpersonal. They will help lead and facilitate the conversations, the meetings, keep the meeting on time. You throw in a mathematical who's going to be timing, yes, 4 minutes and 13 seconds, you know, and you bring that together. The final group is the hardest to read. They are the more quiet of the group, the introspective. They are the thinkers. So when the meeting is going on, they may be sitting in the very back and maybe even with their arms crossed, and we think they're not open to these ideas, when in fact, they're thinking. They're processing, how does this relate? How will this affect my people? And even though they may not speak up during the meeting, they will come back with questions that need to be addressed. That's their superpower. So we have the ability to communicate with each of these 7 channels. And if we're weak in one area, we need to boost it so that we can communicate with other people, because then if we're meeting people where they are, we will have less chaos, less triggers, because people aren't difficult. They may be having a difficult moment, or that there isn't connection.
Yeah.
So my angle on creative leadership is to communicate and meet people where they are.
Yes, absolutely. That's a master class in 5 minutes. There's books written on this and programs to take on this.
So there is one more question, if there
Okay.
is time permits. Leader, how do you deal with unconscious bias? Any tips? Unconscious bias, and if you have any tips, how to deal with that?
Well, first of all, I think that that's my work to do with me if I have unconscious bias, and to explore it. For me, that is to notice every time I have a reaction. So I used to have an unconscious bias about cleanliness. I was raised that cleanliness is next to godliness. And I live in a home in downtown Victoria. And what I didn't know until I explored this and asked myself, what are my unconscious biases? And I recognized that, oh, cleanliness is really important to me. I noticed that when I walked by people, I would hold my breath. I suddenly became conscious of my unconscious bias. So I feel like it's a continuous exploration of who we are, how we live our lives, how we react to those around us. I love brilliance. I love people who have really quick minds. And yet I've done work with people that that are challenged in that area, that have different gifts than I have, because it teaches me things that I love to appreciate. And it also teaches me how I have a bias. And from there, I think it opens us up to appreciate people anywhere on the spectrum where they may be. And I always feel that those lessons come to me because of something else that's going to happen, that's some learning that's going to show up to serve me in the future. I want to just close by saying, don't be afraid to be innovative because you've got a position of responsibility or you don't even have the title. We have influence, and sometimes it takes innovation, it takes creativeness, but it also takes courage. Don't be afraid of your gifts. Don't be afraid of going outside the lines. There are rules in Toastmasters. They are very wide and broad. I have found that in all my years of lobbying and being creative and pushing for changes, that I've never broken the rules. There is a lot of space to be innovative, creative in your leadership, at work, at Toastmasters, in our communities. Don't get myopic. Don't buy into what is. Look out there and say, what could be? What could I make it? And bring your gift to that. So I encourage you to be creative in your leadership. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Few years ago, Pat taught me about transformational leadership. And one thing in transformational leadership is about risk tolerance. As a leader, we need to develop that tolerance to risk so that we can do something creative. Today, I want to encourage you to create that tolerance to risk. And once we have that tolerance to risk, then we can practice that creative leadership. Give a big hand to Pat, everyone, please.
Thanks, Abhijit. Thank you so much. Thank you.